to Assembly V1.1 July 2020. I'm Joel Batman Zaritsky. Welcome, everybody. I see a lot of people here in the Zoom room. We've got people actually on the V1.1 page. I just first want to give a happy birthday to tonight's lecturer, but also it happens to be the birthday of John Midgley, who's the original master blaster of V1.1. So it's a great day for birthdays. Excellent. Well, thank you all for being here. Before we get to today's host, I just want to say that I'd love to have you at the season finale of the SAM lecture series next Friday. It's actually going to be my birthday weekend, so you're all invited with Max Maven. So it's going to be a great time. So I hope to see you all there. So without ado, let's go to tonight's host, Matthew Crabtree.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this meeting. Excited to have our guest tonight, Pop Haydn. I've enjoyed his work for years. His thoughts on character creation and originality and all that is great. So without further ado, let's hand it over to tonight's guest of honor, Pop.
Well, hey, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight. Hope everybody's doing well. Did you have some questions for me, Matthew?
Well, we can start with the questions, or you can talk a little bit about how to create a character and why it's important to have a character in Magic.
Well, I don't think it's all that important. You have a character whether you know it or not. I would start by saying that Magic is um, a special kind of art form. It's not really theater. It's a branch of theater, but it's more like the kind of theater you would see at a sideshow or where the strong man is demonstrating his skills. In a lot of ways, Magic is that sort of theater. Now, if you were to go to see a strong man do his show, afterwards you go to the pub and sit down and tell people what you did today. I went to the fair and I saw this strong man. He was the strongest man in the world. And people would go, well, what did he do that made him so strong? And I said, well, he took a bar of metal and bent it around his neck. I go, wow, what kind of metal was it? Oh, I don't know. Well, it could have just been lead, you idiot. And they drop the story and they forget all about it. And your story is a total wipeout because you couldn't defend it. If you had instead said, oh, yes, it was solid iron. I tried to bend it. I picked it up. It was amazing what he did with that. It was the biggest. Nobody could bend that with their bare hands. Then they would have a story you could say. A magic story is kind of the same thing. The magic story is not really the story you're telling, but it's the story that you create for the spectator to tell. Um, the spectator is going to say, I saw this guy and he did this. And people are going to want to know, well, not that they don't believe you, but they want to know that you were a solid observer, that you were paying attention. You would have asked the same questions they would have asked. For example, if you put a coin inside a bottle, people go, that's impossible. That couldn't have happened. It must have been a trick bottle. Well, the spectator has to answer, no, it couldn't have been a trick bottle. I examined it. I drank a beer out of it. Well, it has to be a trick coin. Well, I examined the coin, and there's nothing trick about it. It was a $50. Well, then it must have been he switched coins on you. Maybe he did, but I was holding the bottle by the neck. The coin went in through the bottom. What kind of trick coin can go in through the bottom of the bottle? Well, that's the story, and that's what you want them to tell. And when you do that one kind of magic trick, I'll show it to you. Actually, this is, if I can do this right.
probably one of the greatest tricks I know.
Here we go.
Did you sir check that out? That's a Heritas bottle, right? Just a soft drink bottle, nothing to it. You can examine it closely. It's just a bottle. There? Excellent. And examine this as well. You got one? All right. Is this yours or mine?
That's
yours. Oh, okay. That's okay. It doesn't matter. I'll use yours. Hold your left hand out this way. Like this. Hold the bottle really tight. Okay? Hold it up like that so everybody can see. Folks, a $50.
Wow. Wow.
Very nice, huh? Go ahead. 1850s, folks, an illusion from the 1850s. The coin in the box. Thank you very much.
Well, that's the coin in the bottle. And as you can see, the trick is a beautiful trick. It doesn't need much character. People are going to tell the story of the trick. I saw this guy put a coin in the bottle. And it's a great story. It'll get him a long ways. As a matter of fact, you don't really need a character at all to do a magic trick, one magic trick. It's when you start doing more than one. When you have to keep the audience with you and you're doing this trick and that trick and the other. Eventually, people kind of want to enlarge the story. Well, how can this guy do all these things? And that's when your backstory and your character begin to come in. It's creating a place for all these miracles to fit together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. So once you start getting into the point where you have your backstory and your character, and the backstory builds over time, like your website is wonderful with the different things, and I know when you do certain things like the dollar bill with the little zappy box that you have, the teleportation devices and stuff, and you talk about like the sphere, and you say, you can look it up on the internet. You've taken time to build those stories, and you can actually, I know you direct people or can actually look up those things that you talk about on the website, and it directs to a website you created.
Well, I think that's all interesting. That gets way ahead of where we are about talking about character and the importance of character. I just had a post from Matt Northfield, who said that sometimes characters work for some people. Sometimes magicians should avoid characters. It depends on the performer. You don't always need a character. Well, see, that's missing the point. It's like you are a character. When you do more than one trick, people are going to be sitting there trying to figure out who you are and why are you showing this to them. What do these things have to do with anything? They will assign you a character, whether you have thought about your character or not. And oftentimes they will assign things to your character that aren't good for your story and that aren't good for your presentation. For example, most people go, well, why is this guy here? And they just assume, well, he's here to show me how good he is. He's a magician. He's going to show me how good he is as a magician. Well, that's a terrible performing situation because now they're sitting back like this, judging your act with a stack of cards in their lap, 7, 4, whatever. You don't ever want them to be in that position. You have to assume control of your character. You have to let them know right off the get-go where you're coming from, what you're here for, what you intend to do for them. You can say, I'm here to, scare the crap out of you. And you can say, I'm here to amaze you. I'm here to amuse you. I'm here to pull your leg, have a little fun. Whatever it is, you have to let them know that you're here for that, for what you're going to give them, not from what you want to receive from them. And then you have to let them know what you want from them, whether it's pass the hat and get some money, or get a big standing ovation, or whatever it is you're going to give to them. So these are character decisions. You have to make them yourself. It doesn't matter if you're playing somebody other than yourself. Um, Acting is a big range. You know, some people can only be themselves as actors. Um, Guys like um, Humphrey Bogart, say, you know, um, he has to always be Humphrey Bogart. A guy from He wouldn't play a very good King of France. It was kind of disruptive to see Edward G. Robinson as the priest in the Ten Commandments. Yeah, yeah. See, Pharaoh. Yeah, I'll tell you what you need to do, Pharaoh. It's kind of upsetting because he was outside his range. But playing as anybody from New York, playing any kind of gangster role, or any kind of role as that would explain his accent and mannerisms, he was wonderful. Humphrey Bogart, the same way. He could be a miner in the Sierra Madres, or a gangster, or anything within his range of acting, but he couldn't be something else. Well, he could be himself with acting and thinking about his choices, and um, working to create what's near him, what makes sense out of his character. Well, if somebody is going to play themselves, and I recommend most people do, unless you've had training as an actor, it's very, very difficult to create a character that's different from you. And even um, a lot of actors can't do it. They have very little range. Some great actors have huge range, like uh, Laurence Olivier or Meryl Streep. They can play all kinds of characters, all kinds of ways. But most people can't do that. I'm not much of an actor. I can do a character. I know how to invent a character, but it takes me a long time to do it. Actors have to learn a new character every week. You know, for me, it's a years long process. And Pop is this very special kind of character. It was created for special reasons. I really don't recommend to anyone else.
Yeah, because I was going to say, I remember, Whit Haydn, and then your accent was different then, and you dressed different, and then over time, the Pop character came out. And how important do you think, if you're going to play like an over the top version of yourself as your character, how important do you feel it is to be on all the time when you're performing? Like, even if you're just going to do one trick, or one effect for somebody, or just a couple things, how important is it to always be that character, even if it's an informal setting?
Well, your base character, the guy that you want people to believe you really are, that's the character that you're based on. Your performing character is going to be a little more over the top. Um, Pop has an offstage character, which is basically like this. He can talk to you, and seems to have, um, a lot of integrity with the character you see on stage. But this guy on stage is a lot bigger emotional reactions, and he's got a thicker accent, and you know, is more on. Um, but you really don't want to do business with the man that's on. I knew a guy that had a wonderful children's character, kind of like a chipmunk voice, and hi kids, and wear a fancy little costume, and it was a wonderful character. But he insisted on being that character all the time, and actually grown-ups don't want to do business with the chipmunk. I keep telling him, drop it, drop that talk, just talk to me like a normal person. And he had no way of doing that, and it cost him an awful lot of business. Well, so you should either have an offstage version of your character that you can do business with, or but really, what pop is an experiment that I did in magic, and I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. Once you create a character like pop on stage, um, you have to be able to live with it most of the time. I don't have a southern accent. This is all fake. I grew up in the South, so I know what a Southern accent is like. But I lost it when I was 20, intentionally, to become an actor, and I didn't use a Southern accent for 30 years. And then when I became pop, I brought this back up. But now, if you drop it, it's like taking the head off of Charlie McCarthy. It breaks the image, and people don't like it. Become trapped in it, like Chung Ling Soo. You know, I can't speak in English in public.
Well, to play off the character in that, you had an essay on the Magic Cafe years ago talking about originality and why it isn't always a great thing to try to be original right out the gate when you're starting out. And so as you're talking about building, over time your character will build and the audience will help you along with that. Originality is the same way. And at what point do you feel should someone start to take, something they learned and start to make it more of their own outside of, just pick a card, put it back, here it is.
Well, I think that what makes magic interesting to people is when the magician has a reason for doing it. What is he trying to demonstrate? What is he trying to prove? And like I said, if your attitude is right, that it's about joy. It's about sharing something that you're enthusiastic about. That makes a huge difference. For example, you can show somebody this big list of stamps that you've got, this all these big stamp books you have. You collect stamps. Show that to a kid and talk about how valuable they are and how much each one costs. And it doesn't really make much influence on them. They're not going to become stamp collectors. They're still going to think you're kind of a nut. But if you open it up and you show them what made you interested in stamps, you could tell them the story. Look at this stamp. See, it's a sailboat out at sea. There's nobody on it, on the mast. But here's another one, and it looks like there's a guy up in the mast sighting with binoculars, and that's just a misprint. It's just a blob of ink. But it's interesting, and this one stamp is worth, a few cents, but the one with the mistake on it is worth a fortune because there were only a few of those. And then you tell them other stories about where this plant is from, or who this guy was, or why these stamps are interesting. And you get the kid to realize maybe not that he wants to be a stamp collector, but at least go, well, I can see what this guy sees in it. When you're doing magic, you're doing the same thing. You want them to think, I may not know why he does this, but I can see what he sees in it.
So Brett had a question. The pop character, you said it evolved over time. How far have you evolved the character from the first iteration, from when you went transition from wit to pop to where you are now?
Well, when I was 50, Billy McComb was my great mentor and friend and best man at my wedding. He's uh, was just a wonderful magician. And he told me, he says, you've reached an age where you have to start looking for a character you can play the rest of your life, what you can play as an old man. And what he meant by that was that when you're up to a certain age, um, you can be charming and good looking and clever, and that's enough. And there's all these other charming, clever, good looking guys that dress like you, work like you, and they're all, you know, making a living and being clever and charming. doesn't take much differentiation, doesn't take much unique character. Their personalities themselves are enough. But when you reach 50, then you got to keep competing with those 20 and 30-year-old cute guys who are smart and clever and, hip, and it becomes a lot harder. So you need to find a character that'll suit you as an old man, to separate you off from them and from other performers. Well, about 5 years later, I was asked to do a shell game at a cowboy festival in Santa Clarita, California. I was known as an expert on the shell game because I taught a course at the Magic Castle called School for Scoundrels with my partner, Chef Anton, where we taught the three-card monte and the shell game and um, fast and loose and all the other pitchmen and conmen type things, and how they apply to magic, what they can teach us about magic. Well, I loved the history of the shell game and these con men from the 1890s and the gold rush. And so I jumped at the chance to play a Soapy Smith type character. And I bought a costume and I bought a fake mustache and put it on. And I tried to do a Western accent, and it ended up looking like a mashed up Gabby Hayes and stupid. And I just couldn't do it. So I thought I'd do a Southern accent. I did a copy of my grandfather's Southwestern Virginia accent, and with a deeper voice. And I did, and it worked really well. People came from across the street to see the shell game, and it kind of broke through the chatter. And I thought, well, this is good. This is strong. This might be a good character, for my old age. And I started working on it. I grew an actual mustache, and eventually I got tired of it. You can't just do the shell game at three-card monte. Being a con man magician is fine, but it's limiting. Besides, I really wanted to do some of my own tricks, the linking rings and Mongolian pop knot and tricks like that. So I had to extend the character and his backstory. He's not just a con man. He must have been a con man and then went into the medicine show. He had to draw a crowd to sell his medicines. And the medicines gave me another way to go and different ideas. Then I wanted to do the teleportation device, which is a trick I developed for Bill and Lemon. And it didn't quite fit with a 19th century con man. So I had to make him a friend of Tesla in Colorado Springs when Tesla was living out there. And he was a genius and inventor. And then he developed a teleportation device and all of that. So the character gradually developed over time as I kept extending the backstory so it would fit to do the magic that I want to do.
Let's a real quick question. You're talking about Tesla and the teleportation device. Which came first, your teleportation device or the movie The Prestige?
Oh, I developed my teleportation device in 1981. It was, I've got video of it on my YouTube channel, the first night I was playing with it. It's basically, it was based on Wilfred Johnson, magic tricks and card tricks. I seen a trick in there where he took an egg. He borrowed an egg from the audience. The magician would go, I need to borrow a fresh white egg. And a gentleman in the audience reaches in his pocket and holds up a fresh white egg. I just thought that was funny. I said, I got to do a trick with that. And then he would have a bill borrowed, and the bill would be folded up and it would be burnt and disappear and end up inside the egg. Well, I didn't like the bill being burnt. I wanted it to go away by itself. So I thought maybe I'll just put a battery or something in a little wooden box and then have it like a needle coming up, like a receipt block, and put the bill up there and have it go automatically by magic. Well, pretty soon that developed into the idea of the teleportation device. And, I created it. At that time, it was based on kind of like a plastic experimenter box from Radio Shack. It was like a 50s science project. When I started doing pop, I had to make it look more 19th century.
A quick side question on the whole character thing. David in the chat room wanted to know, is it better to keep the character background ambiguous, or is it something you really want to be specific about for the sake of having a real well-rounded character?
Well, the backstory is the story that goes on before you hit the stage. The only story that matters during the show is from the time they introduce the magician to the time he leaves. You don't really have much of a backstory. The backstory is what's going on before you get there and after you leave. It's the imaginary story that makes sense of why you're there and what you're trying to show, what you're trying to accomplish. The backstory is for you, the actor, to have. And the audience is supposed to sense it's there without really necessarily knowing what it is. I never explain anything. I walk up to people at a private party as Pop, and I just say, take a card, you know. But in my head, I'm Pop Haydn. I used to, back in 1910, I was a medicine show guy, and I got blasted into the 21st century by accident, not entirely my fault. And along with a bunch of other medicine show guys, we're all here trying to make a living, you know, in this weird place. And this lady, I'm a magician, and this lady hired me to do this magic show for her guests. You're one of her guests. Take a card. And that's the way I look at it. So that's my backstory coming in. But I never explained that to the spectators. They, it's their sensing of what's going on. Like, um, if you met Doctor Who, you know, he'd be telling you I'm the Time Lord from the planet Gallifrey, and you're thinking he's some kind of nut, you know, until eventually you see him actually doing things with that sonic screwdriver that can't be done. And you go into the TARDIS, and it actually is um, a lot bigger inside than it is outside. Suddenly you begin to think the story is real. So Pop is one of those fantastic kind of characters where he's acting like he's here in this world on his own motivation. It's like he's a Wizard of Oz, blown here from Kansas among the Munchkins, having to make a living. But these people spend $4 for a bottle of water, so it's like paradise for a con man. So that's Pop's attitude. I don't have to explain that to people. They sense it, or they sense enough of it to know that everything I'm doing makes sense. And if they want to find out more about the backstory, they get that from the website. You know, this is like in the old days, the magicians would have posters like Chung Ling Soo in the Caves of Mystery, or Carter, you know, in a pith helmet, catching a lion in the jungle, or Blackstone, the magic detective, had his own radio show. He had his own comic book. So when kids went to see Blackstone, they were going to see Blackstone, the magic detective. You know, it was like going to Indiana Jones doing a lecture. I saw this guy, Harrison Ford, on the movie, and now there's a lecture. It's Indiana Jones, and it's Harrison Ford telling us about some of the priceless things he brought back, and the kids would go to it, and the grown-ups would go to it, and it'd be fun for both. You know, even though the kids, the 9-year-old sees it one way and the grown-up sees it another, it's still fun. It's in the imagination. So Pop is coming from that sort of point of view. If you want to find out about Pop, or if you meet him on the internet, it's going to be this whole big story with how he got here, what he did before and what he did now. And you can see the videos of performances and stuff. But when you see the show, you don't know any of this. You either go to the internet afterwards and find out about it, there's more to it, and become a fan, or you find it on the internet and then decide you want to come and see the show. I think the internet is really important because it gives us a way to create a huge backstory and a fantastic character story, as well as one more about ourselves. You know, Uri Geller didn't play somebody he wasn't. He was a character, though. Um, he played the part of a guy who had been um, met by um, a spaceship when he was young. He was introduced to the control group of nine who controlled the universe. He was given special powers. That's his, in his head, that's his story. He didn't say it at first or out loud, but that was the background. You know, he's playing a character. Now he plays his character so realistically, so believably that it gets near charlatanry or closer.
So the character and everything. So the question, quick question I have, so I don't forget this later on, is that I've heard you talk about some of the slides that you do now that you literally have worked on for 40, 50 years. But what is your thoughts on presentation over method? Which is more important to you, as the performer? The presentation or the method behind the illusion.
That's kind of like asking a pilot, what most important skill is in flying a plane. It's like, well, you need all of them, really. It's the same thing with performing. A really strong magic trick, like the coin in the bottle, that a magician, anybody can introduce that without character, without any presentation, without any story. It's so strong, it stands on its own. It's getting people to start watching again as you develop another trick and start to do it and another one. That's where you need something that holds their attention and brings them um, back so they can watch the next trick. As many more tricks you do, the less astounding they all seem. One astounding thing after the other, till eventually people are numb to it. Um, when you want to draw them back, you have to have some reason for them to come back and watch it again. And that's where the character and presentation and personality come in. First is the basic reason why you're there, knowing what you're trying to get from these people. If you're there and they're sitting there like judges with the signs in their lap, then they're going to watch you. And if you fool the crap out of them, they're just going to go, I have to admit, the kid is good. The kid is good, don't you think? Yeah, the kid is good. Which is dead kind of applause. But if you scare the bejesus out of them, they go, whoa, that was scary. That was scary. Wasn't that scary? That was scary. Well, now they're applauding and giving you something back for what you gave them, rather than judging you and deciding you did a good job. So that's the kind of first character things that you have to develop. Who are you? Why are you here? What are you trying to do with these people? These are basic acting questions that you have to ask about your character. If you don't, the audience is going to answer them for you, and usually not very well. But to do these things, you don't have to change your voice or your mannerisms or your history or anything like that.
The variety show, there seems, there's a revival nowadays of, Americana and folk music, and guys get like Old Crow Medicine Show and Trampled by Turtles and those groups that are doing that type of music again. And you have your medicine show. Do you feel it's better when you offer an evening of entertainment to have just, a magician, or maybe do something like a old school variety medicine show?
I'm not sure what your question is. I've done both. I have my own show, which is basically just me doing magic with my musician or band. And that's the Pop Haydn Medicine Show. But I also have Pop Haydn in the 21st Century Show, which is more Pop introducing the people from his medicine show, along with some people that he's met here in the 21st century. And that might have other magicians in it, might have any kind of variety act, jugglers and fire eaters and knife throwers and things like that. It's more of a full-fledged medicine show.
Yeah, that's why that's why I was asking about the importance of the variety show again, because it seems like now we've moved away from, different style of entertainment that fit inside the same sphere, like, the jugglers, the knife thrower, the fire eaters, the magician. It's like they all have their own separate performance space, where it used to be they would all perform together. So is that something that you think, more magicians could benefit from having other style of entertainers perform with them?
Well, I tell you, for me, it was more a matter of survival. As you get older, you don't want to do as much traveling. And I love working ensemble, with a group of other performers. I love jugglers and sideshow people and magicians and circus performers and um, acrobats and all of that stuff, burlesque. Um, it's all a lot of fun. And it's all that's what I like about performing is the feeling that it's live. Live performance is different. I don't like to do performances on video that are not live. I like to do video of live performance. And because in a live performance, everything is different. People are there. You might be able to find them. You might be able to hear somebody laughing or heckling you, you know, and you might turn and there's something going on. There's a relationship between the audience and the performer. I started out as a street performer back in the 1960s. And so for me, a lot of the joy comes out of the interaction with the audience and the holding their attention. And so for me, um, I really like to create that feeling. I don't like using microphones even when you can help it. I think it, especially if the sound seems to be coming not directly from you, you know, it's distracting. It doesn't make that connection feeling between you and everyone in the audience. So I like live performance, and I think magic is best when it's a story you tell about somebody you actually saw, you know, somebody who you had a chance to deal with. And for me, pop is like a guy walking off the movie screen. You know, the weird guy from the medicine show is actually off the screen here now talking with you, and you get to deal with him. You get to play with Doctor Who. And maybe he liked you, or maybe he thought you were funny, or maybe he thought you were a good assistant, or you had some relationship with you. Suddenly that all becomes a story for them to tell, and an experience that they have, a memory that they have as if it was real. But it's all just a story that you created for them to tell.
A year or so ago, I ended up taking a road trip. I'm based in Texas, but I took a road trip back to Ohio. And part of the thing I did, I downloaded your street story book. And it seems like this is something you talked about working the streets in the 60s and building, but you also talked about traveling to other countries and ended up, there was one story you told about, I can't remember which country you're in, but you couldn't work because you weren't a citizen, but they introduced you as their nephew and you went from there.
Oh, that's a good story. That was in England, in London. Um, I was trying to do street magic in London. I'd done a very successful job in Paris. And I came over to London, and I was at the Hyde Park. And, because they had free people, anybody could get up and talk there. And I tried to do a show and collect money. And the police stopped me and said it's an offense to the Queen, which she hadn't seen the act, so I didn't see how that was possible. But it stopped me. And I went to Ken Brooks' magic shop and was talking to Ken Brooks, and he was explaining, that basically the only people that are allowed to work for money on the streets are disabled veterans. And so he said, what you need to do is go find one of these guys performing on the streets and set up a mutual thing where you can perform together. And so I went back out and I saw this guy doing a one-man band, Johnny Magoo. He was actually very famous in London as a street performer and had this wild little portable stand on wheels with drums and kazoos and cymbals and accordions and all kind of penny whistles and a guitar, everything in the world. And he played it all at once. It was his own orchestra. It was Johnny Magoo, one-man band, and he had on the back of the little trailer that said, "This space to let." But I just thought he was clever and stuff. And it turns out he had actually been in the introduction to one of the Peter Sellers movies, um, showing him in the park playing for the people. But anyway, I went up to him after his show and said hi. And he was Johnny Magoo. He was an Irish fella, a disabled vet. And this is what he'd been doing for 20 years. And I showed him some magic. And he says, "Okay, let's work together." And so he would introduce me as his son from America. And I would, he's an Irish guy, so I was his son here from America, this great magician. I would do magic. He would back me up with the music as I was doing it. And then he would go and play his music, and I would pass the hat because I could go around the crowd. And this worked really well. We went and did it at the Derby, a race track outside of London. And we just had a great time, and it worked really well. After that, we would split the tape. So that's how that story came by.
So you started working in the streets. Anyone who has read the book or listened to it knows, where you started in New York and how you built to where that was. But someone in the chat room wanted to know, anyone who has watched you on YouTube or seen you in person, you have a very special relationship with the audience that comes up to help you out. And it's like, like a little play back and forth tease with them, but you're not mean to them in any way. Over time, has your interactions with the audience become more gentle, or is it less gentle now than it used to be?
Well, I've always been of the opinion that the person that comes up and helps you with your show needs to be treated specially. They're a volunteer. I always think of it as I'm the lead actor in an improvisational theater, and when I choose somebody from the audience, they're coming up to interact with me improvisationally, and I need to give them the lead, that they need to do a good job. And I try and get them on my side and get them to pay attention to me and play along with me. And if they do, they're going to look like $1 million. And that's what I want it to be, a fun time for them where they get to play with, interact with the magician, with Pop, and they might amaze Pop. They might make him laugh. They might enjoy interacting with him, and they'll feel like they had a special part of the story. But the rest of the audience, they're improvisational actors too. They have a part to play too. Like in the linking rings, I assign the onstage kid, the onstage adult member, whoever it is, the role of being the cheeky student up to help the teacher and making fun of the teacher behind his back. I make it so that when I turn around, I've just unlinked the rings and showed them how to do it. I think they're with me. I link my rings, and now I turn back and their rings are still linked. I act like they stayed up with me. You're doing great. But it looks like the person is making fun of me behind my back. And that's what creates this whole routine where it looks like the magician is an idiot and is being made fun of. But the audience, they know that in reality, I've set this whole thing up. They know that I know what's going on. So they have to pretend in their minds that I don't know what's going on in order to laugh at me. They suspend disbelief and get into the story too. So they're laughing at me and in the process, they're actually playing a part. They're actors too. And they're playing a part in this story that we're creating of the teacher with the kid making fun of him behind his back, and the audience full of unruly students laughing at the teacher. And so you create that whole scene with them. And that's the way I look at it. That's why there's a feeling of give and take. That's why there's fun, because it works on several different levels. The level that they play along and laugh at you because you're so stupid, and the level at which they know that you're in control of the whole thing.
Because whenever a young magician asks me about audience, the two pieces that I recommend the most for them to watch is your linking ring routine, and also the Mongolian pop knot, where you have that same play with the audience, but no one actually comes up on stage. Do you find it? Trying to think of the right words here. Would you rather work with someone sitting in the crowd, or do you prefer really having them up on stage with you?
Well, I don't like having too much people up on stage. It can blow your timing if you're trying to get a show in 1 hour. The linking rings and a couple of other tricks I do might bring somebody up or have somebody involved, but mostly I don't have too much involvement in the stage show. In the close-up show, of course, you want to involve everybody you can. But in a stage show, it can slow things down, bringing too many people up and down off the stage. So I usually only really do that once in the show. A lot of times I have people help me from the audience, as in the Sphere of Destiny routine, the question answering act, or with the rope routine where I hand the rope out and let them examine it from the audience. And then I kill time by being funny with the ice cream bar and other things while that's going on.
I wanted to ask about the ice cream bar. The very first time I saw it, it was probably one of the funniest moments I've seen in a magic routine. How did that come about? Is that something?
It's based on the old banana thing that Roy Benson used to do. It was way back older than that, where you had the zippered banana. He'd bring out a banana, take a bite out of it, and then zipper the peeling back shut and put it back in his pocket. Well, I was with Doc Eason at this place down near San Diego that made fruit. They're gone now, but they made silicone fruit, ice cream bars, food, delicatessen type meats, anything that would be used for a photo shoot or for the movies and stuff like that. These are things that look fresh, but would melt otherwise. They're fake drinks, fake everything. And it was all silicone. It was amazing stuff, so realistic. You'd want to take a bite out of the apples. And so we were there looking for fruit we could use in the cups and balls. And we were looking around, and I found this thing sitting on the table. And what it was a silicone ice cream bar with a bite taken out of it. It had been used in those commercials for the Dove bars, where they took photographs of Dove bars. With all the hot lights and everything, you can't have real ice cream. They make a fake one that looked just like it. That's what they used. And they had one that had chocolate on it, and one that had nuts in the chocolate, and all these kind of different Dove bars sitting there. And I picked one up and held it like with the bite away from, as I said, Doc, and pretend like I took a bite off. And it looked great. And Doc was fooled. He said, "Where did you get that?" Because it was an awfully hot day. And I said, "It's over here." And he said, "What, it's not real?" I said, No, it's just these. And they were $60 each, but that's $60 I ever spent. And Doc bought one, and we both put it in the show.
Another question about the audience participation, like where you start to hand out the rope and you're like, yeah, that's enough. You also have a couple of behind the curtain things you do, the silk to egg and the color changing silk. Do you find the audience interaction with that? Is that something that you find plays really well to, I'm going to let you in on the secret, and then you just pull the rug out right under them just as you get to the good part?
Well, yeah, I kind of set it up, though. I like to tell them, some people think it's fun to be fooled. Some people think it's not that fun to be fooled. I haven't figured it out for myself, so I thought what I'd do is a little experiment. I'll show you a trick and I'll fool you with it, and then I'll tell you how it's done. That way you have something to compare. And then I go into the sucker trick. But the suckering is it's done lightly. It's like you don't have people bite. You know, it's not like the hippity hop rabbits where you have people yell and turn them around, turn them around. You don't. You let them off the hook, like Vernon did with the three-card monte. You know, he bends the corner of the card, throws the card, and then he could have somebody bet, where do you think it is? If they bet on that bent corner, you go, ha ha, I fooled you. But instead, he throws them down. He looks like he's about to ask somebody to guess. And then he notices the card is bent. And he picks it up and unbends the corner. And the audience can see it's the wrong card. So he lets the audience off the hook. He not only fools them, but he's more of a gentleman about it than they would have been. Well, that's what I like to try and do with Pop, is to fool them, but let him off the hook. And Pop is really probably more of a gentleman than they would have been in the same situation.
We had a question about we talked about being a lead actor in an improvisational play with the audience, and obviously scripting in your show is very heavy, but the improv side of it, is that something you would recommend for magicians to, you know, take a class or two in, or spend some time around an improv group to learn more of that style?
I really do. I think improv is closer to what magic style would be, closer to what you have to do in magic. It teaches you all of the skills about focus and sharing and other things that you need that come up all the time in a magic. And when you learning acting as a skill, it's a lot more involved skill. I mean, not in some ways, it's nothing more involved in improvisational work, but in other ways, when you're learning acting, you're learning how to go into the psychology and the background of the character, and how to develop the character and let it flow through you. It's a whole development of skills that people try and approach from different methods, but it's a long, involved process. And improvisational theater sort of cuts to the beginnings of the situation. It gets you where you want to be right away. Mime is another thing I think that is extremely helpful for magicians, for developing clarity and revealing things. But I have a little, we studied, when I was in a theater company, when I was back in my 20s, we studied Viola Spolin, who did improvisational work. She wrote the book Improvisation for the Theater, which is an excellent book. I highly recommend. Viola Spolin. But those exercises, those theater games, were things that taught you about focus and one thing or another. You learn a lot. Just one game, for example, she would ask an actor to get up on stage in front of the other actors and say, "Don't do anything, just stand there." Well, most people can't stand there. You know, they'll stand there for a minute and then start doing a little dance, playing with the audience or something. And so you go, "No, don't do that. Don't do anything, just stand there." I think I would eventually just stand there. But it feels difficult, doesn't it? You know, feels like you have no direction. It's the actor's first fear, what to do on stage when you don't know what to do, when you don't have any direction, you don't have a script. She said, "But now look at this. Just stand there. But while you do, count the tiles in the ceiling throughout the whole theater." So the guy would stand there and and he was more relaxed. And the audience was more interested. It looked like he was doing something. And that's all the difference in the world is actually to be doing something. Look, here's a glass. It's just a glass. That's acting.
So with the improv, learning to work off the cuff like that, that brings us to a question someone wanted me to ask about is the routine for the blind that ended up in Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Oh,
Is that something that you had in your pocket, or is that something that, you came up with on the fly as it was happening?
well, no, it's something developed when I was working in New York City doing street magic. Sometimes it'd be too cold or the cops would be on you too much for you to do magic outside on the street. So I had to go into bars and busk the bars in order to make a living. And busking was not very well known at that time. And if you go up to a table and say, want to see some magic, they think you're going to trick them or something. And so I came up with this thing where I would be dressed like a student from New York University, and I'd come up and say, folks, I'm doing some experiments in extrasensory perception. Um, would you help me with some experiments for my class? And then I would do mind reading magic with everybody at the table, and then at the end say, you got any change you can help me with my research, and pass a hat. And it usually did really well. One of the tricks that I did was where I had a deck of cards and I'd spread it, turn to one person sitting down. I would come up to him standing and I'd pick out a card and say, is this black or red? And during that process, I would cue them with my foot, tapping on their foot. And this was based on an old trick where the magician would put his, have the spectator put their fingers on his forehead. And then he would teach him a code as they went along by clenching his cheek, teeth. And that would make his temples bulge. So he would say, can you tell the red? And he clenched his teeth from the black, and he wouldn't. And they go, oh, I get it. So every time he clenches his teeth, that's the one it is. And then eventually they would name it red and black and, doing other things. And he could eventually give him a number or something like that. Well, that was where the idea came from. I just thought about doing it with my foot. And then I would do that trick, and I would do brainwave for another person, some other ESP trick. And that was basically how that whole thing developed. But I was doing this in a bar in Marie Callender's bar in California, much later in the late 70s. And there was this table that I went to, and there was a lady at the table, a young lady and her husband, and an older couple. And so I go up and I say, would you like to see some magic? They go, yeah, sure, fine. And I turn to the older lady and say, would you take a card? Great. And I turn to the younger lady, would you take a card? And I turn my head and nothing happens. And I turn back and she goes, I'm sorry, are you talking to me? I'm blind. Oh, well, this isn't going to make a lot of impression on you. I'll tell you what, we'll do this trick and then I'll do something special with you in a minute. And that's when I was doing the trick, finished the trick, and I'm thinking, what can I do for this girl? That's when I thought of this bit. And I turned to her and I said, look, I'm going to take one card out of the deck, and I want you to call it red or black. And I know you can't see the back or the front of the card, but just name it. And as I said, just tell the red card from the black card. And I just tapped her foot, and she smiled, and pretty soon we were doing it. And then she was able to call the, it's a red card, is it a diamond or a heart? And I tap her foot when it's on the heart. She say, heart. Say, what's the value of the card? Count 1, 2, 3, 4 taps. And she go, 4. Well, her mother just about screamed. It was just, too much. It just, killing. She thought it was really funny. And then I did the Out of This World with her, where I laid the cards out. And I said, these are face up, red and black, and I let her touch them. I said, I'm going to hand you the deck. The cards are all face down. I want you to go through them one at a time, and just face down. Red cards over here, black cards over here. And I finished out the brainwave with her. And when we turned the cards over, they were all correct. She could tell that was true by the reaction of her mom and dad. And now she was fooled too. And then we did the brainwave card, where she named the card that turned face up in the deck. And that became my routine for the blind after that. It was published in Michael Jeffrey's book, Speaking with Magic. And from there, it went to Chicken Soup for the Soul, where they published it in the third book, Chicken Soup for the Soul. And then they did a TV program of it, in which George Tovar, my dear friend, plays my part in the show. And ever since I've teased him about he's not a real magician, but he played one on TV.
Also from reading some of your stuff, I know that you were in school for something completely different than what you do now. If I remember right, you were going there to become a preacher, correct?
Yes, I went to Virginia Theological Seminary, Alexandria. I studied for the Episcopal ministry there for 2.5 years. It's a great time. I had a degree in philosophy from Lynchburg University in Virginia, and so this was working on a master's degree, and I didn't finish. I quit at the middle of my third year.
So how does someone go from that background to the scoundrel you are today?
Well, I was a scoundrel first. I went back to school after my time on the streets working in New York City. And so I had already done the shell game on the streets, and when I went back and finished my degree in philosophy. So that was really kind of, even in seminary, I would often make extra money by working DuPont Circle and that area around DC.
So how did the scoundrel thing? How did the School for Scoundrels start? What was the genesis of that?
Well, Chef Anton was a pool trickster. He did a little bit of magic, but he was mostly a trick shot artist at pool. And young fella, and he called me up and said he wanted to help him develop some pool shots that involved magic, which I began to do. We developed some trick shots which involved deck of rising cards and different things, and kind of a brainwave thing where he rolled the ball to the one card that would face, that was the chosen card. All these kind of things. We came up with a bunch of them, and he won the trick shot championship at one of the casinos, and he decided he wanted to do something with the trick shots, and he was going to do trade shows where he could take his sponsor would bring the table, and he would do performances and attract people to a booth and sell a product, which I was doing with magic, and I kind of helped him get involved with that. And then he wanted to add to the act things he could do, actual magic tricks and stuff he could do to expand what he was doing. And I suggested he work just on things that had to do with gambling and con games. And he could become a con man, which he liked a lot. And we worked on the shell game, three-card monte. And I told him I used to do the shell game on the streets in New York, and I had some clever stuff with it. And he wanted to see it, and I pulled out some shells, and for the life of me, I couldn't remember anything that I used to do. It was all like gone. It had been years and years. This is like 1994. And then I was moving some books in my book, and Bobo's Coin Magic fell off my shelf and hit the floor and opened up. And it opened up to this place where there was a stack of about 15, 20 index cards. And they were all like football plays. They had little round things and arrows and stuff. And I was looking at it and go, oh, these are my notes from the shell game from the early 70s. And I called him, and he came over. We tried to figure them all out. Pretty soon he said, there's something here. We ought to write a book on this. And I said, well, if you'll help me, I'll do it, because I don't want to do that by myself. At about that time, Mark Wilson called me and asked me if I would help with the Magic University. This was 1996. And if I would do a class for the Magic University. And I said, I will if you let me do a class on the shell game and three-card monte and the endless chain and the street scams. And that'll give me an opportunity to study this stuff and put it all together the way I wanted for the book. So what we did, and we started the School for Scoundrels in 96, and went for like 20 years at the Magic Castle every year. But there people would come in, they don't have to be Magic Castle members. We had policemen and lawyers and historians, gambling historians come in, and it was a great fun time.
No, so speaking of the scoundrel and the scams and stuff, someone wanted to know when you leave the house, when Pop leaves the house, what magic do you carry with you? And as a second part to that question, if you're going to play the scoundrel part, if you're going to do the magic based on card cheat, shell game, confidence man, how important is it to have ready at your disposal a set of bar bets that you can do on the fly?
Well, that's all up to the individual. I don't perform much except when I'm being paid to perform. I usually have a set of pocket knives on me for the color changing knives. Right now I've got Roger Lovin's beautiful high-end knives, and I always have those with me. I usually have a Morgan silver dollar I can do that with, and if I have a deck of cards, I like to borrow a deck of cards, but I don't really go around much performing except when I'm working.
Because I know some professionals just don't work outside of but someone just wanted to know what you carry with you.
Well, normally I carry just the knives and a coin or two. I carry that with me everywhere. I don't go out without that. If I'm going to perform, or I think I might perform, I usually have a deck of cards and my wallet and maybe a stack of 6 coins.
One of the routines that I think defines your character, sets up the character, is your version of the 6-card repeat, which I think is great because you don't do the endless counting of 6 cards and take away and then 6 cards.
Yeah, I wanted to eliminate a lot of that repetition.
And so is that something you normally open with on your stand-up, or is that something you always have in your stand-up show?
I like to open with it in my short show. When there's children, it's not a very good trick for children because it involves, they take it too serious. They want to yell at you that you dropped one, they don't quite get the nuances of it. but I also I will use it as a MC bit or a lone bit. Like I work at Booby Trap, which is a variety show in Hollywood, and if you only do 4 minutes, so that would be one of the things I would do on its own there, or as an MC bit between acts, as well as the opening for a show. What I like about it is it reveals the game to the audience right away. They see both the magical character who believes in magic, who's having a problem with the mathematics in the room. Things just aren't working the way they're supposed to. And it's a magical character with magical reasoning. But the first time you actually count the cards and there's still 6, the audience is going, damn, the bastard. So the poor old guy that drops the card is not the same guy as the bastard that just fooled them. They know immediately that there's a trickster character behind the old fool that believes in magic. So to me, that's a very interesting and nuanced way to introduce both the clever magician character, the trickster character, at the same time as you introduce people to the bumbling magical character.
I wanted to touch on a couple of people that seems like are important to your act and your character and where you're at today. I read somewhere that when you were doing strictly close up at the time, and at one point you met Brian Gillis, and I think I read you two swapped acts.
Well, yeah, Brian was a student of Eddie Fechter's at the Forks Hotel, and he was down in Tennessee working at a nightclub in Tennessee. And so I, it was Knoxville, Tennessee. I was in the audience and saw him for the first time. We met, and I'd been doing basically stand-up magic, parlor magic. I was a street performer working on the street corner. So it's the rope and the rings and cups and balls and things like that. Brian was just a card trick guy and did some coin magic and card tricks and worked the bar. He was a student of Eddie Fechter's. So his magic was just the most amazing stuff I'd ever seen. He actually would knock people off their seats. He would do a trick so bad, guys would fall off their bar stools laughing and amazed. And he was palming cards and doing all kinds of real sleight of hand, peek deck cards and stuff that I just had no clue how it worked. And so we became friends, and eventually I taught him my rope and ring routine, and he and other stand-up trick, and he taught me his close-up act, mostly Eddie Fechter's stuff. And I went out to California and was doing mostly close-up magic for a living, working in restaurants and bars. And he went to Tennessee to Silver Dollar City, which is a theme park. And he started doing the medicine man character there. And he would do the rings and the rope and things like that to draw a crowd, and then do a funny pitch for the medicine. So that was my first connection to a medicine show, was that. Eventually my version of Eddie Fechter's tricks grew into my own, and I changed things around, and it became almost unrecognizable from the Eddie Fechter stuff. And Brian changed my stuff around and got into other things. You know, so we didn't have the same acts anymore. About that time, he moved out to California too. So we were able to see each other more and do more. But our acts had changed by then.
So it brings us to the next question. Someone wanted to know, you do a variety of styles. You have the knuckle busting close up. You have the close up that's somewhat, semi self working. And then you have your stand up act, where most magicians focus on one style. Do you feel it makes you a better performer and a better magician to have the scoundrel, the close up, the parlor, and then the stand, the more stage style stuff?
Well, yeah, I think close-up magic is really good for a stage performer because it helps you develop that relationship with the audience, that give and take, and helps create a more intimate relationship when you're on stage. So close-up helps to uh, help the stage performer move across that bridge from the corner of the stage into the audience and create a more intimate style for the stage performer. In the same way, stage performing helps the close-up magician create a bigger style to work for more people at a time. A lot of people have a hard time once they get out of that little crowd they're used to of 4 or 5 people standing looking down at their hands. When you get into the close-up gallery at the Magic Castle or some other venue where there's a wide audience, you need to be able to include them. And uh, working on the street or in the parlor or on the stage gives you more of a feeling of including the whole audience and dealing with the whole group and drawing them into what you're doing and just generally playing bigger and working for a bigger response. So one informs the other and it's really good for you. I think the con man stuff, the scoundrels presentations are really different from magic. I always think of them as little interludes. In magic, people are never sure how to respond. Should I really shuffle the deck and screw him up? You know, should I really give this a thorough look and find the secret? Or should I just let him play his little game? They're always a little uncomfortable how to respond. They don't know what the right thing to do is. But with the shell game, they know right away. It's me against you. And they want to play. And it's a nice relaxing of the fantasy and the lying. There's no lie. It's my hands against your eyes, and the audience relaxes in a lot of ways and wants to just play, sleight of hand for its own sake, and not, to make them believe something that's not true. They like it. It's a nice little interlude, and the story is different. When I saw the magician, as I saw him take this coin and put it in a bottle, I have no idea how it's done. Or it must have been this. No, it couldn't have been. It couldn't have been this. It couldn't have been that. What do you think it was real magic? No, but you tell me, what was it? In a shell game, it's a totally different story. I saw this guy who was the best guy you ever seen with the shells. He moved that pea around. I could never find it. Well, do you know how he did it? Yeah, of course. He was picking it up and moving it from one shell to another. I just couldn't see him do it. See, it's not the same story. It's a story about skill. It's like I played golf with Arnold Palmer. Well, did he beat you? Yeah, but you should have seen it. And you tell the story. See, it's that kind of story. It's a story where you saw the best. You saw the strong man. It's that kind of story. So it's different from I saw a miracle and I can't figure out how it was done. And neither can you. That's a different story. One story is going to get resistance. Oh, that couldn't be true. It's got to be a trick bottle. The other story is not going to get any resistance. It's really, I'd have to see that. I bet that was fun. You saw the best in the world. Huh? Yeah. So it's two different kinds of stories. And that informs things too.
So I guess that kind of covers a question Kevin wanted to know about combining magic styles in one show. I'm guessing he's talking about, adding a little close up to the parlor show or a parlor effect into your close up.
Well, I think you can do anything. It's like I think this is where a lot of people go wrong when they think of characters and they want to do what you see now. Everybody's a character. You're a character just being yourself. Eddie Fector was a character. He was a big, meaty old guy, had tattoos on his arms. He'd been a professional wrestler. He had been in the Navy. He worked in bars. He had a great sense of humor. He was just a character. And he did these wonderful magic things. And, he had a reason for doing it, and he knew what he was up to, and it was fun, and he knew how to play with people, and it was great. But he wasn't playing somebody other than himself. He himself was a character. Right away, I think people, when they hit 50, they start becoming characters, whether they want to or not. They become caricatures of themselves. But at any rate, the main thing is that the character that you're playing is, if it's going to be something fantastic, if it's going to have a backstory that's not real, if it's a fantastic backstory, like Pops, he was blown into the 21st century. You can do that with a grain of salt and with a kind of like tongue-in-cheek kind of style like Pop. Or you can do it very seriously and real believably like Uri Geller. You know, the closer you get to charlatanry, the more believable and the more scary and impressive the magic is. But it's also the more vulnerable it becomes, because once people realize that it's a cheat, it is not really magic, they become disappointed instead of fun. If people find out how one of Pop's tricks is done, they don't go, oh, he's not real. He's just a liar and a fake. He's not really from 1910. You know, nobody does that. It's just fun. But when you're trying to prove that you're a real magician and that what you're doing is real psychic stuff or real magic stuff, and it's, you know, more seriously presented, as Uri Geller did, then people can actually believe you. And when they find out that they were tricked, they're not pleased. They feel stupid and they get mad.
So that brings me to a question of, you talked about doing the ESP study back in the 70s in New York City, working the bars. And I know you do a mental epic. So how much mentalism do you think is okay to put into a magic show before it starts, you know, bordering on, you know, maybe he does have real powers?
Well, that's up to the performer. You know, it's like, I don't think there's anything wrong with charlatanry. I think Uri Geller did a great thing, great service for the country, because what he did was balanced off by the reactions. You know, the closer you get to charlatanry, the more likely what you're doing is you're weakening that there's no such thing as magic side of the equation. There must be something like magic. And now it's not a dilemma anymore, you know. But to me, the fun of magic is the preposterousness of it and staying on the top of the dilemma where they know there's no such thing as magic, but they can't think of any other explanation. So that's where you want them, is right there, perfect on the dilemma, where they can't explain it, but they know it's not real. And the more serious you get, the more you move towards charlatanry, the more you weaken that one side of the dilemma. And it must be magic because there's no other explanation. And that's not, to me, a fun place to be. That's where you're getting religious or into a con game. You're doing magic not for the sake of creating the dilemma, the fun dilemma, you know. Well, you know that's crap, right? You know it's bullshit. And yet it's so believable. And they laugh because they know it's both. You get to the dilemma and you eliminate that side that there's no such thing as magic, and then you get into, you know, magnetized water is real, you ought to buy some. You know, or I know what your granddaddy who's dead wants to tell you. I'll reveal it to you. You know, once you get toward that kind of stuff, it's not a lot of fun. And, you know, I've had magicians who, you know, do magic and people get to the point they can almost believe it's real magic, and somebody turns and goes, can you cure my cancer? See, I don't ever want to be in that position. I don't believe in magical things.
Well, I think that's why your silk to egg and the color changing scarf is really nice, because it puts it right there. And just when you think you know, oh yeah, it's an egg and it's got a hole in it, we can see the handkerchief on it, and then you get them and then you crack that egg on them.
Yeah, it's just playing with them again. You know, to me, it's like I'm playing with their heads, and they know it. You know, that's the fun of it, especially when I'm coming out in Hollywood in front of a bunch of 20-year-olds who, as soon as they see me, think, oh, gosh, old man, this is going to be boring. And so from the very beginning, you want to kind of screw with them. You want to play with their heads and get them to realize that you might be a little more to reckon with than you look like at first. So that's when tricks like that, it can be a lot of fun. You overturn their expectations. I'm working on a new routine for the Chinese sticks that I've just done for the first time. Put it up on video on my YouTube. You can look at it. It's a little rough, but it's a wonderful story told with a good but kind of simple trick. I'm kind of the position that a trick like coin and bottle is so strong, doesn't need any fantasy, doesn't need anything other than itself. But the cheaper the trick, the gaudier the pattern. So I've got this whole story that makes Chinese sticks a lot more fun for me, and it sells a lie to the audience that's totally believable. They'll probably tell somebody about the bamboozles. So check that out. It's just brand new on my YouTube site.
You talked earlier about improv and the improv of the audience between the two of you. And like I said, the scripting, but when it comes to your audience interaction, do you have a set of lines that you pull from, or do you really listen to the audience and play off them? And then how much material have you lifted from your audience? Like, oh, that was a really good line. I need to, that's going into the next show.
Well, I lifted an awful lot from my audience. That's always a good thing to do. If somebody says something funny, find a way to put it in your act. You got to be careful, because a lot of times they're telling you some end of a joke or some joke that's from some other performer that they heard. And then you subsequently end up stealing a line from another performer that you really shouldn't have. But yeah, it's good to listen to the audience. Most of what I do in performance is actually scripted. I don't have ad libs, I have subroutines. If somebody says this, then you can come back with that. And you develop these over years of people heckling and stuff. So a lot of times when you read a show, a routine, one of my routines, like the Chicago Surprise, the line that comes next is the right line, no matter what's happening. But it's especially right if this thing happens. So that's one of the reasons it's not good to be changing routines after you learn them, until you've done them a few times, until you understand why the pattern is set up the way it is. Because I spent 30 years polishing the pattern, every word, till it's perfect, and it works every time, no matter what people are doing to you. And to take that and just toss it, 30 years of work, toss it and make up your own stuff right away, is kind of arrogant, and you're losing a lot of the value of what went into making it the way it is. It's like an actor. You don't have to change the script of Hamlet in order to do Hamlet different from another actor.
That was something else I wanted to ask about. I noticed lately, obviously, since no one is really performing live anymore, I noticed on your YouTube channel, you have started to do Shakespeare. And is Shakespeare and that style, and I think I read somewhere you've also published poetry. Is that something that you find helps with the magic every once in a while, just to walk away and read sonnets to people?
Oh yeah, well, of course, the other thing is that on the internet, you run out of magic really quick. There's only so much magic you can learn and do and be different from the other magic that's going on around you. And if you have fans and stuff, you want to keep them watching, you have to come up with all kinds of different stuff that may be of interest to them. So I have Pop as doing classical recitations, which he might have done in a Chautauqua setting back in his time. And he would consider himself a fine Shakespearean actor. So those little things just give something else for people to look at. I do advertisements for the magnetized water. I put up websites about magnetized water and sphere of destiny and stuff to give fake information to people that want to research my stories. If they um, search sphere of destiny and put quotations mark around it, they're sure to come to one of my fake stories about the sphere of destiny and what his background was.
And that's something. It seems like that's unique to you to have, breadcrumb websites to, back up, the the fantasy of your act. Where was the inspiration behind that to
Well,
build something like?
when I started doing the magnetized water routine in my stage show, I noticed people were looking up magnetized water on their iPhones, and I thought that Pop would be the kind of guy that he wants you to realize this is a 21st century magic medicine show. This is not a recreation of a medicine show from 1910. This is Pop having been in the 21st century for 15 years now. He knows all about the internet. He knows all about what's going on here. So he's going to use that technology the best he can to create the image he wants to create. And so when he's talking about magnetized water and people are looking at, I want to tell people, you open up your iPhones, take pictures, take video, put it up on the internet. Just say something nice about me on Twitter. I want them to really feel like I'm here in the 21st century. And I want to lead them to look up things on the internet. I bring up the magnetized water, they look it up, they're liable to find one of my websites or information that I want them to find and make it seem like that whole story is bigger than it is and more true than it is. And it just gives them stuff to look at to keep them going. Like my website has more stuff than you'd ever be able to look at in one sitting. It's got kind of story stuff and it's got photographs and videos and stuff. It's not really to sell myself to a buyer as much as it is to give a fan something to get into the character and get pictures. With enough pictures, eventually they imagine themselves in their head of character Pop that's involved in all kinds of mysteries and stories and, extended thing that when they see me on stage, he's now like coming to see Blackstone the Magician. Now it becomes a bigger story and a more full out, more interesting character. Plus, it's a character they can research on the internet and keep looking at stuff for a long, long time. I want to do, I have a phrenology set where I can do some talks about from the point of view of a consulting phrenologist and other other things like that, where Pop can extend the character and find other things to interest people in the character, aside from his magic. And it's kind of a lateral advertisement. When you advertise Pop Haydn, the magician, all the time, it gets boring and old. But advertising Pop Haydn's magnetized water can be funny and interesting. And even your fellow magicians will republish your advertisement because it's about something else, about funny stuff, not a direct head-to-head about your magic.
The magnetized water really leads into a question that I wanted to ask. Soapy Smith. You touched on Soapy a few times, and anyone who follows you on Facebook will see the post and Soapy Smith Day at the Castle. What is it about him that has drawn you to him?
Well, Di Vernon was the first one that clued me into him. Di Vernon was a big fan of Soapy Smith and had studied him quite a bit. Had gone to the show up in Skagway, the days of '98 show, and then had actually sought out Soapy's descendants and found in San Bernardino Soapy's grandson, and went and had a picture taken with him at his home and saw some of Soapy's stuff. He was amazed by Soapy's influence on the shell game, and he was fascinated by Soapy's career as the first real American gangster who had a real gang that controlled the city of uh, Colorado, Denver, Colorado, controlled the city of Denver, Colorado with 100 con men. And he had to fix in with the governor and fix in with the police. And he was a real modern kind of gangster. And so Diverner was enthused about all that. When I started searching for the shell game experts, Soapy kept coming up. And he was also tied with Claude Conlon, who became Alexander, the man who knows, and had the most extraordinary career as a crystal reader and psychic in vaudeville. He made over $20 million as a psychic in vaudeville. He was a total con man who worked for Soapy up in Skagway. Um, Alexander Pantages was a bartender for Soapy Smith, and he founded the Pantages Theater chain. Um, Misner, Wilson Misner, who was a playwright and aphorist, and who helped found the Brown Derby here in Los Angeles. He was an assayer for Soapy and learned all Soapy's tricks. So he was a character right in the period of the gold rush, and I just thought he was a fascinating, interesting character. And when we decided to have a party at the castle for the School for Scoundrels, we thought we'd celebrate the king of the thimble rig, Soapy Smith. And I met Soapy's great-grandson, Jeff Smith, and brought him to the party. And we had old-time gambling, and we had con men going throughout the building trying to take stage money for charity. And it became a regular thing at the Magic Castle since 2007.
So for the people who don't know, how did he get the name Soapy?
Well, he was arrested in Denver. He was doing what's called the soap pitch, which is now you sometimes see it in the circus or the fair or carnival where they sell candy with a prize inside, you know. And the prize is usually a diamond ring or something really valuable. And they sell these little box of Cracker Jacks, whatever, for like $5 a box. And this was basically the same thing. Soapy would have a Sapolian soap, his own manufacture. And he noticed there's a lot of people not familiar with my product among the crowd here. Let me open it up, and he takes the wrapper off and shows the purity of the soap and talks about it. And then he takes a $100 bill and wraps it around the bar, puts the wrapper back on it, seals it up, and drops it into this suitcase, empty suitcase. And he takes another one as he's doing his talk selling the product. He's putting a 50 around another bar of soap and dropping it in there, and then 20. And next thing he knows, he's dumps a bunch of other bars into that same suitcase and mixes them up. And he said, these bars are 25 cents each. These over here, there's about 15 or so. They're going to go for $5 each. And of course, the shills in the crowd start buying them. Somebody finds a $20 bill. Pretty soon, everybody's buying those, and gets down to 2 or 3 bars, and he ups the price, and people are paying like $20 for an empty bar. So the actual bills are, of course, stolen out by sleight of hand. So there never is any money in any of the bills. That's called a soap scam, and it was the basis for, he was arrested, and the guy couldn't remember his first name, Jefferson, so he called it Soap. Soapy never liked that name. He didn't use it. He was Colonel Smith.
And so how did that lead into the magnetized water pitches that you do? Which if you haven't seen it, Google, go to YouTube and you have it there. Or if you want, you can share it with us. But it's a wonderful pitch.
The magnetized water came, I already had a medicine pitch for the Amazing Miracle Oil, which is like a 5-minute talk. It's a comedy bit and it's funny, but I didn't want to do 2 of those in the same show. It would be too much exposition, too much talking. So I wanted to have another pitch, another product. And instead of a pitch, I decided I would have a product where I was trying to justify the problems people have been having with it. So instead of saying, I'm going to tell you something, I would be going, well, folks, we've had a few complaints. I would say concerns about my product. I'd like to defend my product right now and explain how this is all consumer error and not our company's fault. And so that would give me a totally different approach. And I took a bunch of old water tricks that I never thought were very good and put them together into a one routine that kind of like justified and promoted the magnetized water. Magnetized water is a real thing. You can buy it on the internet. It's advertised, and even magnetized things are advertised. So magnetized stuff like that has been available since the period. So it was when I first saw advertising for magnet belts from the 1890s and 1870s, and those little devices you crank up and they can fill you with static electricity for health reasons. All of those came into this idea of doing the magnetized water thing.
So before we, is there any other subjects you want to cover before we start to wind down here for the night?
No, it's anything people want to talk about. If they have any questions, now might be a good time.
Brett wants to know, what's your favorite con game bar bet style?
But I think fast and loose really, because it can be done and you have such total control. You can really lead people along. It's like Darwin Ortiz told me the way I do it is like a alibi joint. An alibi joint in the carnival is something like the little ball on a string and a like a thing that sets up like a bowling pin, and you try and swing that ball and knock the pin over. And the guy showed you how easy it is, but then you try it and you miss. And of course, what's happened is he's moved the pin over just a fraction of an inch to where it can't fall over and the ball can't hit it. But now he's giving you all kinds of alibis. Well, you shouldn't push it. You should just let it go and don't pull too far back and aim straight for the ball. And he keeps giving you all these suggestions for what you're doing wrong. And of course, you keep losing till he lets you win. And then you get your interest back, and then he does it again. So you're betting each time as you're learning. And that's kind of the way that the endless chain or the fast and loose works. You can do it at a bar, and you can get the regulars on it anytime you want it. You can bet them a drink or whatever, and you always win. But when you want them to win, you can let them win. And you can show them stuff, and they think they've got it, and then you fool them again. And you just say, oh, I forgot to teach this. So you just keep them hooked all the time. I think it's a great scam because of that. It's good for kids. You can drive them nuts.
So why magic? What drew you to magic to get you started?
Well, I first magic trick I saw was my father was a minister, and we had a pair of ministers that had been in Uruguay and in different places in Chile and things. And they would sometimes put on costumes to do their, when they came back to the States, to talk about the cultures that they worked with as missionaries and got to know. And he would sometimes dress up like a gaucho or something. And he put on a fake mustache with spirit gum. And he showed me this little trick where you could take the spirit gum, put it on your fingers, and you go like that, and make a little whiff of spider web material that looked like smoke. And it would let go, you'd float up like smoke. So it looked like he was making smoke out of his hand. And then I was only about 7 or 8, and that just caught me. I really was interested in magic. And then later I saw a Methodist minister do a magic show at a summer camp. and he was, to my mind, really good. He did the linking rings and bang on tube and cut and restored rope and a lot of the standard magic stuff, and it was really, really great. But it caught my attention, and that's what I wanted to be. So I started studying it.
What is your favorite style across all the styles you perform? What is your favorite style of magic to perform?
I enjoy close up. I think the best close up card magic. Um, it's my favorite because the skill is so high, and because the power of it is so strong. The impact is so strong, so immediate. You know, I prefer it to just about anything, and it's very magical to me.
Is there a style of magic you're not really a fan of performing? Where are you really okay with everything?
Fan of what?
Is there a style of magic that you not really a fan of performing, or are you just you are you okay with performing all the different styles of magic?
Well, I guess manipulation is my least favorite. I don't do very much. I do the billiard balls and salt pour and a few things, but I don't do card manipulation. The ones that interest me be more like the mosquito parade from Di Vernon, um, which I think is more uh, demanding, more magical. The manipulation magic, for the most part, to me, looks like um, sleight of hand. Things like the Phoenix Aces look like real magic and fool people. And so I tend to, the manipulation I do is like the billiard balls and the Phoenix Aces and things like that that have the look of magic more than manipulation.
So,
Cigar bursts and things like that.
all the effects you perform, what is your favorite one to perform? The one if
The
you only
linking
had
ring,
one.
my linking ring routine is probably my favorite trick to perform all the time because it's always different. It's always fun. It fills me with joy whenever I do it. I really, really have a good time with it. It's almost like a religious um, exercise.
And what is one magic effect that you think all magicians should learn when they're starting out? What is, if someone goes, I want to be a magician, what is the thing that you think they should learn first?
Well, I don't think it matters. I think the thing that appeals to you the most, you know, I think magicians sometimes they get this character thing backwards. Remember, characters to serve your magic. You figure out what magic you want to do and then decide how your character has to change so you can present it. Um, you don't want to say, I'm going to be Indiana Jones, so I need a trick with a whip, and I need a trick with a pistol, and I need a trick with a fedora. Um, that's too limiting. If you say, I'm going to be a gambler magician, so I can't do anything about magic except card tricks, and they all have to be about gambling. Well, you see, that's very limiting and unnecessary. What you really want to do, there were Soapy Smith was a gambler, but he could do card tricks and magic tricks, and Wyatt Earp could do the shell game as well as deal Pharaoh, and he probably did some card tricks. Erdnase did magic tricks, a lot of them, as well as being a professional gambler, because you might want to entertain the ladies, something like that. So you change the story, you expand the character, so there's a reason, a justification for him to do what you want him to do, for him to do the kind of magic that you want to perform, not the other way around. Magic should be the purpose of what you're doing, creating the magic effect and building the story around it and the character around it. that is that is the stuff that helps present it, but that's meant to serve the magic. When you're doing theater and you put magic into theater, the magic is supposed to serve the story. So if you're doing a story of um, uh, the Tale of Two Cities, and you have the scene come up to the end where you're going to have a guillotine, and Sidney Carden's going to go to the guillotine, and he says, "I wrote much better rest than any I've ever known," and he's put down, and the guillotine comes down, and you decide you're going to use the best guillotine you can find, the greatest magical effects so it looks really real. Well, if you do it too real and that thing comes down and the actor's head is chopped off from the audience point of view, is he okay? Is everything all right? It looks like there was an accident or something. It can pull them right out of the story. So you don't want to use the trick that good. You want to pull the trick back in order so people stay in the story. If Peter Pan flies and it's so amazing that people are jumping out of their seat and looking for the strings and wondering how it's accomplished, it takes them right out of the story. So in theater, you want the magic to serve the story and not take people out of the story. In magic, the story has to serve the trick.
Um, almost everyone has read The Time Machine, and at the end he takes, he's going back to the future and he takes 3 books with him. If something would happen and you were going to be transported to a time before magic, what 3 books would you take with you to restart the performance art of magic?
Masculine and Divine are magic, for sure. Darwin Ortiz's books, I think, would be awfully good to take back with you. Because the theory and stuff is, the magic will grow up on its own. People are clever. It's presentation and making magic fun, making it understandable to people what you're doing and why. That's the hardest thing. People have often bad attitudes toward magic because they've seen a magician who had an impure idea of why he was performing. He was trying to trick them or fool them or make an idiot out of them. And that turned them off from magic forever. The real secret, I think, is to find the joy in magic, what you enjoy, what makes it turn you on, and learn to share that like a stamp collector did. Share that with people by letting them understand why it is that you think it's so great. Why do you think this trick is so worth doing and so amazing that you want to show it to them? That's the real ticket. That's what you're trying to do, is share your enthusiasm for the trick itself, for magic itself. And if you get them to understand that you like it and why, they may not want to become magicians, but they might go, well, I can see why somebody would like that. And then you've passed on magic.
So a subset of that question, someone wanted to know, what is your favorite magic book?
Our Magic is probably my favorite magic book. That's what most of my theory and ideas about magic come from. I was amazed by the way that those guys would do both things. They would do pantomimes and theatrical productions in which magic was used as a special effect or a transitional device. But they also did magic, where they used theater and theatrical elements in order to make the magic more entertaining and more fun. And so they understood both. And in their 22 rules of magic, they explicate so much stuff that I don't think it takes a lifetime to begin to understand.
If something happened and you never became a magician, what is the other profession that you would have liked to have gone into?
Well, it would probably have been the priesthood if I didn't go into magic. I had always been into magic, always wanted to do it, but I was very political in the 60s, and I wanted to do something serious, something for the world. I wanted to do something that was important to change the world and make it a better place. And I decided to go into the ministry and studied at seminary. And a very wise old professor, Dr. Reginald Fuller, was in his 70s back then, and he was one of my religion professors at the seminary. And I was doing magic tricks for the students at a student and faculty party. So the faculty and student were gathered around. I was doing card tricks and stuff, just like I had done on the street. And this old professor, English guy, tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Whitney, may I speak with you?" And I said, "Sure, Professor, what is it?" Took me aside and he says, "You know, when you do those little magic tricks, you light up like a firecracker. It's really amazing to watch. Have you ever thought of doing that for a living?" And I said, "Well, Professor, I did do it for a living. I worked on the streets. I did it all over Europe. I had a wonderful time doing magic for tips and stuff. It was a lot of fun." He says, "Well, what made you decide to do something else?" I said, "Well, I wanted to do something relevant, something important for the world." He says, "Well, it's not as if God needs you." I said, "I beg your pardon?" He says, "Well, you know, the good Lord is perfectly capable of saving the world all by himself. He doesn't really need your assistance. If he wants you to be a martyr or a saint, he'll call you and you'll want to go. But until that time, when he gives you some joy in life, that's his greatest gift. That's his talent that he gives you, the thing that makes you want to stay here and love your life. And if you love magic, um, it doesn't matter if it's not important or if it's silly. Um, it's a joy, and he's given it to you, and you may want to follow it." Well, that a few months later, I had dropped out of seminary and I was doing magic again full time, and I've been doing it ever since. And I feel like it's made my life one that's full of joy. I love getting up. I love working on my magic, even at 71. And I feel like I've maybe single-handedly saved the Episcopal Church.
I felt that way too when I left the church and stopped playing in the band. Um, what is your favorite sound in magic?
My favorite sound?
In magic?
Silence.
Silence?
Oh yeah, when the audience just sits there and goes.
Morgan and West said the same thing. That was their favorite sound.
The moment of wonder before they start applauding. That's when they're right on the point of the dilemma, and they just what? It's kind of like that moment in the Roadrunner where the coyote realizes he's stepped off the cliff, and he looks down, and he's not falling yet. He looks down and sees how far it is, and then you go, hey. And then he falls. That's the moment, that silent moment when the magic hits him, that I like the best.
Okay, we're coming up on the last question. If you could go back in time and watch one magician or one con man from the past perform, who would it be?
Probably Keller. I'd like to see what, or Robert Houdin. I think I would like to see either of them, because they were real performers in my point of view and real entertainers. One other guy that I would really like to have seen is um, oh, I'm tired of it. Potter, Richard Potter. He's a black performer from the Revolutionary War period in America. He was the first American-born magician, and he was famous all over the country and traveled all over the country. And he did ventriloquism and magic and acrobatics, and he was supposedly hysterical to watch. And I think I would probably love to see what he was like. He's more like um, a sidewalk performer, a street performer, than the other two. And I would have loved to see what he did.
So as we wrap up tonight, you talk about online website. Where can people find you online? And do you have things for sale? Where can they find those?
But I have two main websites: pophaydn.com. There's no E in Haydn. It's just Haydn, like Haydn. pophayden.com. And then my magic website where I sell magic videos and books is popsmagic.com. POPS magic.com. No apostrophes or anything, just popsmagic.com. Now, my YouTube channel is just youtube.com/pop-hayden, and that has an awful lot of video. And it has video back of the same routines when I first started doing them as Pop um, about 15 years ago to the present. So you can see the character and the voice develop and the tricks come in as they did. When I first started out in the earliest years, Pop was more of a gambler character and oily and smooth and intelligent. And he became more of a wacko as I started adding more of my magic and changing the character around. So it's worth watching the development.
Well, we like to thank you for spending some of your time here tonight on your birthday to talk to us and share your thoughts. It's been a really great time here with everyone. To let everyone know, next month we have a treat. Mario Lopez, not the guy from Inside Edition or Saved by the Bell, but FISM winning Mario Lopez is going to talk with us next month. And then coming up in September, we kick off year 5 of V1.1. And we're going to kick that off with a members meeting here in Zoom. So get your routines ready. And if you're not able to join us live, you can always email us. I'll post a link on the Facebook page, and Joel will send out an email with the link to the email in it. So again, thanks for joining us, and good night.
Good night, everybody.